Hello and welcome back to you live from Paris. It's time now for all today's business news with Matthew Warren, who joins me now. And Matthew, the European Union leaders are meeting today in Brussels. It's take two for that budget agenda.
Yes, better luck this time, we hope. Of course, they met back in November to talk about setting the EU budget for the 6-year period from 2014. They'll be meeting later in Brussels today, hoping for more success. They didn't do very well last time. Well, what are those chances of success? This report from Karen Creed.
The challenge of getting an agreement on EU spending. That's the task for the European Council President Herman Van Rompuy, who had to call time on a previous bid to settle the contentious issue. Now, this Thursday, many European Union leaders are set to push for a harshly pared-down budget when they meet for a 2-day summit. The UK is leading several member states in calling for bigger cuts in the 7-year EU budget, which will total about €1 trillion for 2014 to 2020. They think these cuts should be applied across the board and reach right down into wages and tax-free benefits for about 35,000 EU civil servants. On the other hand, poorer eastern and southern countries in the 27-nation bloc want to ensure continued financial support. France and Italy want spending kept at a higher level and targeted more at investment to create jobs at a time when 26 million people are unemployed in the EU. The education sector is expected to get a financial boost as an effort to combat youth unemployment.
The budget must be an engine for growth and jobs in the future. And that is why it is so important that we increase in real terms spending on research, innovation and education.
Van Rompuy's proposed budget of commitments of €973 billion is expected to be changed to €960 billion. If the leaders can come to an agreement, they will then focus on free trade negotiations with the United States and Japan, seen as key to delivering elusive growth, jobs and prosperity.
Karen Creed there. Well, Matthew, while those leaders are gathering in Brussels, there's another important meeting going on in Frankfurt.
Yes, now that meeting is the meeting of the policymakers at the European Central Bank. It's a monthly meeting they have, and a few things usually come out. One is what's happening to the main interest rate in Europe. That is expected to stay where it is at 0.75%. Now, the other issue that the ECB President Mario Draghi, you can see there, is likely to be asked about is the strength of the euro. That's been a big talking point in the last few days and weeks, and that's because the euro has been rising against the dollar. It's at a 14-month high, up at $1.35. Countries including France, for example, saying they want to see a medium-term strategy to manage that. They don't want it going too high because it hurts exporters, whereas others, Germany notably, saying that they don't want to see a policy like that. They think the euro is not overvalued at the moment.
Okay, well, another important issue on the agenda for that meeting as well.
That's right, and that's Ireland. Now, Ireland, of course, was hit really hard by the financial crisis, and when the property bubble burst, it really hurt their banks. They almost collapsed under the weight of the toxic loans they were carrying. Well, the resulting bailout also crippled the country's finances, left it with a huge debt. Well, now the country has found, it thinks, a bold approach to tackling that debt and getting it down, and it will be talking to the European Central Bank this Thursday as well about that. Will Hildebrandt has more.
Another cost of the crisis. Irish Parliament has approved IBRC, formerly known as Anglo-Irish Bank, to be liquidated. It was strapped with toxic loans, aftermath of the country's property bubble. The previous government had to bail out Anglo-Irish and another collapsed bank, Irish Nationwide. At the cost of €48 billion, that's more than €10,000 for every man, woman and child in the country. Money that had to be borrowed from the European Central Bank. Ireland was required to pay €3.1 billion annually until 2023. The next payment was due in March. But Prime Minister Enda Kenny had worked to lengthen the repayment period and lower interest rates. And liquidating IBRC is expected to ease the burden by more than €1 billion. The bailout bill is to be converted into government bonds that will mature in 2040 and onwards. In the meantime, Ireland will make interest-only payments, a deal that would give the government much-needed breathing room as it tries to sort its finances. The ECB is expected to make a decision on the proposed plan Thursday.
So, Matthew, how are the European markets looking this Thursday?
Well, they opened a short while ago. Let's take a look. I can tell you the FTSE falling slightly, as are the others. Paris and Frankfurt both down. In Asia as well, it was a similar story in the Thursday trading session. Markets down there. We saw a huge rise, of course, in the Japan Nikkei on Wednesday. Probably a bit of profit taking going on there. And in the Shanghai Composite, perhaps a bit of caution ahead of New Year celebrations and the holiday. Also, Lorna, some data on the French trade deficit. Let me give you that. That was 67 billion euros in 2012. Now, that was actually slightly smaller than the figure for 2011, 74 billion. The trade minister saying exports of agricultural, pharmaceutical, luxury products helping to improve things a little bit there. Well, now let's get some of the day's company news. And the Swiss bank Credit Suisse turned a profit of just over $400 million in the last 3 months of the year. That was a big improvement on the $700 million loss a year earlier. The bank's been through a period of cost cutting over the last year, cut a further 2,300 jobs in the final quarter.
An improvement in results at Japan's Sony. The electronics company made a loss of $115 million in the last 3 months of the year, but that was an improvement on the $1.7 billion loss a year earlier. Sales were up 7% and a weaker yen helped results.
And the chief executive at France's Alcatel-Lucent is stepping down. Ben Verwaayen says it's an appropriate moment for new leadership at the telecom equipment maker. Well, he made the announcement on the day the company reported a loss of 1.4 billion euros for 2012. That compared to a profit of 1.1 billion the year before.
Well, we're going to stay with technology now because there's been a bit of confirmation that tablets are just going up and up in popularity.
Yes, that's right. Now, I was thinking about how back in 2010, when the iPad launched, a lot of people were skeptical because there have been attempts to launch tablets in the past. They'd never succeeded, but boy, they were wrong because they've really taken off. And latest figures out for the October-December pre-Christmas period showed that 1 in 3 of all computers sold were tablets. We can take a look at the figures because while overall sales of computers were up 12%, tablet sales up 75%. They look like they're going to be streaking ahead at some point. 134 million computers sold in total.
Okay, now the question everyone wants to know is which company is doing best out of all that?
Well, of course, Apple defined this category really with the iPad and they're still leading, but it's not all theirs by any means. They sell about 1 in 5, 20% of tablets, but you can see behind Hewlett-Packard, Lenovo and Samsung. Samsung, of course, the leader in smartphones, and they will be snapping at the heels, I'm sure, of Apple if they can.
Okay, well, just to finish with Matthew, you told us yesterday Monopoly fans, and I was quite interested in this, are voting on which of the current tokens to get rid of. Shocking, sacrilege. And you've got some results from that vote.
Yes, that's right. So this was a pretty big operation, actually, by the makers of Monopoly, designed, I'm sure, to stir up a bit of good PR like this. But they wanted to find out which piece would go and which new one would come. And there you can see the new one, a cat. That was the winner.
Unsurprising from internet users, perhaps. They do love pictures of cats, don't they?
And people love animals. And so that was the one that will be the new token. But you might be interested to hear which one got kicked out as well. And the ones doing worst in the voting were the boot, the iron, and the wheelbarrow. I can tell you it was the iron. I think that was your favourite even.
That was my favourite one.
Yes, I'm sorry. You should have voted.
But it's so convenient to move around the board because it's got a little handle.
Well, that practical consideration just didn't swing it for many voters, and they decided that they wanted to see it go. So there you go.
Well, thank you, Matthew, for bringing us all the important business stories.
Everything you need to know.
Indeed. Right here on France 24. The international weather forecast coming up next. Then Stuart Norval will be here with more news headlines. So do stay with us here on France 24.